All right, good morning or good evening to wherever you are that you're going to be watching this video. My name is Fanuel, founder of SAI, and today we are super excited to have Projekt Inspire. Founders Lwidiko and Vanessa are here with us. And so just a quick thing about nano chats. These are very informal presentations and discussions really with founders of STEM organizations, people who are working at an interface between science and society. And what we try and do really is to get to the nuts and bolts and understand how they do it, well, why they do it, how they do it, and it's a really opportunity for us to learn and discuss. So today, super excited again to have Projekt Inspire. They will present for about 10 or so minutes, and then afterwards, it's really an open-ended discussion, and I hope that part will essentially give us a way to talk more about the nuts and bolts inside the organization. So Lwidiko, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll pass it on to you.
Um, Thank you, Fano, for the invite. It's actually good afternoon from Sweden here. So my name is, as mentioned, Lwidiko, and my basic training is a medical doctor, and currently I'm doing medical research, doing my PhD at Uppsala University, as I'm about to finish it up. But also the co-founder for Projekt Inspire, Ms. Vanessa. She's in the US right now, and she's also a scientist in that regard. And well, as the name suggests, our journey started back in 2014 when we were just merely a group of young graduates from university trying to say, okay, what can we do better to change the world, or if you want to call it, how to make better our society in that regard. And the first slide shows a group of people from different walks of life. So, for example, we have one Noel. He's an entrepreneur. We have a lawyer here. We have an accountant. Myself as a doctor, as a scientist, a diplomat. She's an IT engineer. Immaculate Moshe. She's now works at Google, I think. And this other one is Innocent Mkota. He's also been working in diplomacy. So we started as a youth-based initiative to change mindsets of young people and shedding light to the career options that they have. And to give you an example from my personal example, when I was doing PCB in high school in Kibaha, the only options you're thinking about was you can only be a doctor or a pharmacist or a dentist, at worst a nurse, and that was how narrow this sort of thinking was at that moment, and that applied to many other high school students in other spheres. So there was doing HGL, history, geography, and language. You do think of only law and things like that. So what we were trying to do is to bring our experience with the university to these other young people in secondary schools and tell them, what is it that you can expect in terms of career prospects, in terms of what you could do, and things like that. So when we started, we were quite ambitious, and we had 4 main areas. So we had, with a mission of creating a generation of well-rounded youth with invaluable set of skills and perspective needed into the competitive global market. So we had Inspire STEM, which is part of Projekt Inspire, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And we had Inspire Lead for law, education, advocacy, and diplomacy. We had Inspire Fame for finance, accountancy, marketing, and entrepreneurship. And we had Inspire Health for the health-related people. So all this, when we started off in 2014, it was a big dream. We wanted to, cover all these areas under Projekt Inspire. But moving forward, we decided to streamline. For the past 3 years, we decided to say, okay, let's start focusing on one aspect first and go deeper, have a T version of learning. So we'll go much deeper in one area and try to see how much impact we can make. And this came from essentially after having a session with kids in classroom. So we go to visit schools like this. You have 1 hour, 2 hour session with kids. They ask a lot of questions. You have intimate conversations with them. You see the hunger for more knowledge. And we started to wonder, what can we do more? Instead of just going to school, talk to kids, tell them that you can be a doctor, you can be a genetic engineer, you can be, all these other things. Can we do anything better, or can we do anything more than that? And I remember one day we were just I was on the phone with Vanessa, and I was driving around town, and we were just brainstorming what could we do more. We're like, okay, why don't we start doing something like boot camps, where we bring all these young people with different ideas and try to polish them in that area. And then we started with boot camps, and then we thought, why don't we go much lower with instead of only secondary schools, why don't we go all the way to primary schools? So we started activities in that area, and then after that we're like, okay, how can we reach other kids at home or in other places where we can't really reach them physically, and give them this, inspire them and give them knowledge in terms of learning, in terms of improving their cognitive abilities in areas of STEM. So we had another idea of creating science kits. So this essentially brings us with regards to focus areas in STEM. We have programs and products. So we have we call it the Rising STEAM Stars program. STEAM added with an A, incorporating arts in it. So this is a program specific for children with the age of 3 years to 14 years. And I'll go to slight details in the next slide. But also we have the STEM boot camps for the young people in secondary schools from 15 years to 22, which we also have career guidance sessions with schools, are the ones we were doing before. And we have science kits, and we have science centers. So with the Rising STEAM Stars, these are essentially every weekend, or at least twice a month, on Saturdays, we have a session where parents can bring their kids, drop them off in the morning, come collect them late in the afternoon, and let them play with us with regards to, different programs that we organize. And this mainly triggers curiosity among the young people, and try to feed the scientists in them. As Fanny definitely know this, kids are natural scientists in terms of they ask questions, they eat things, they taste things, they inquire. And unfortunately, this dies off as we grow up. So our focus with this program is to see how can we nurture this inquisitive, this little scientists in these young children, to have them grow with them. So we have these weekly sessions where parents can bring kids over. But also we're wondering, what about other schools that are public where we can't reach them? So we also have outreaches to public schools with these science kits that I'll explain a little bit later, where we have sessions with these in public schools, and we reach out to them. And the previous sessions, which are private with schools, they pay. And these are the money that we get from this, we use it to finance outreaches to public schools like such. And we also have partnerships with private schools that can also, in a paid partnership with these private schools, that our team goes in and then helps their teachers and also the students themselves approach teaching STEM differently, in a more inspiring way, in more practical, hands-on. We have this model called project-based integrated learning, PBIL, where an example, instead of going to teach only mathematics, you take kids to the beach and then teach them how to count the coral reefs. At the same time, they're learning biology, at the same time, geography, at the same time, learning math. And this is the main core essence of project-based integrated learning. And this is what we also do. So we do with private schools, public schools, and we have also private sessions. And now back to the boot camps. This is our flagship event we do it every year, and it's usually tailored around sustainable development goals. How can young people solve problems in the community using STEM that happen? So this example that I'm going to give you is of a STEM boot camp that we did back in 2017, where we had a cholera outbreak in Tanzania, and in one of the places in Bagamoyo, we grouped around more than 70 young people from all over Tanzania, and we grouped them into 4 different areas. The ones who are interested in sciences, technology, engineering, and math. And we told them, this is a problem. We have a cholera outbreak. How can you use these areas to solve this problem? So for example, here you could see in this picture, here's Vanessa here. She was leading the chemistry class. So the secondary school students went to the field, collected water samples, did analysis of different water sources and the chemical components in if they're chlorinated, if they're not, and things like that. And the technology guys, they assess the water sources, for example, the wells, deep wells, shallow wells. They created this, they coded it's called a ultrasonic meter ruler, a digital ruler, where instead of going inside the well to measure the depth, you just click it and then it sends ultrasounds and then tells you how deep or shallow the well is. And also the other ones who in the engineering, they're like, okay, we could do a mapping exercise here. So how can we do mapping? There are many different ways. One of the ways is to use drones. So they learned how to build a drone from scratch, essentially. And that way they're learning technology, engineering around that, but also they went in the field to do mapping. So they did use OpenStreetMap to map different areas where there are different water sources. And then that way we combined data from the chemistry and others in the biology, they did coliform structures to the water sources. So we merged all this data from the chemistry groups and from the engineering group and from the technology group into one big map that you would see here. It's an open map that these things, for example, if you click a well, this is a well, it tells you if it's a private well, who owns it, what's the pH of the water there, the salinity and things like that. And all these houses that you can see here, all this data was generated by the students during the boot camp. And we give this map to the engineers in the what is it called, the administration, the district administration, to see, all the data was given to them to see how useful it could be. So this is an example of a boot camp and what we would do in a boot camp. And that way we try to impart the knowledge of them being problem solvers, but then at the same time, they also have their own different projects that they come with. And the mentors, us and some other experts we have in the group, they help them craft or improve their projects. You could see this young man here, he had a very interesting project that was about recycling plastic materials into building pavement blocks. So this was an environment-friendly project, and he worked around it. It was quite good. We tried to help him out in terms of how to actually pitch, how to improve the technology and things like that. And he ended up winning the Children's Climate Prize. If that was offered last 2 years in Sweden. So we have these kind of stories. And then there's another young man who's into robotics and many other. With the most recent outbreak of COVID-19, it's worth a mention. There's this young man who was working on automatic water dispenser. So he created this technology where you would just put your hands and then the water would dispense and all that. And he got recognized by by the ministry, and we're now working with him towards scaling up into mass distribution of these things to actually solve the problems that you have in the community. So this is sort of the idea around of what we do. And this picture here is important because we also do some things called science slams, where we give them a challenge, for example, how to communicate a Nobel Prize laureate, and read about any Nobel Prize laureate and then communicate. So communicating science in a language that anyone else can understand and things like that. So these are the sort of important skills that we've been imparting to these young people for the past 4 years. And this year, actually, we're planning for another boot camp that will be around in December for the 5th year in a row. So this is in essence the annual boot camps and what have we been doing, and different themes have been happening in different years. And then this shows just some of the innovators that we have. Young people come with their own ideas, so you can find this on our website. We have a bunch of them over there. We try to see if we can link them with potential supporters, building up the ideas from just an idea to actually going all the way to the market. And the last part, this is the science kit. So instead of including just as part of the business model is to how can we generate revenue in one way or the other, and then also how can we share this knowledge to the community at large. That way we can't be there all the time. So we've created these packages, call them Inspire packages, are science kits where they come with a manual and components inside that a child can work with. And this has been very impactful, especially recently where we can't do gatherings back in Tanzania, where we can't bring students to come over in our places, in our gathering space. So the parents have been procuring this and doing this at home as part of stay-at-home challenge to help the kids, help ease even the burden of the parents dealing with children who are at home instead of being in school. So this has also been quite important for bonding moments for parents and children, also the children to continue learning back home. So you can find this on our website, and we continually update more kits as we go along. And the last part it has always been our dream to say, okay, great. So I've traveled around, seen some science centers and science museums. Back in Tanzania, we do not have a science museum per se, or science center, if you would like to call it. So we've had some applications to see whether we can build one in Tanzania, and fortunately, end of last year, and early this year, we got some support to build up a science center. We're now working on a project working at building a science center in Tanga, where it's going to be like probably you've seen science museums, Fanuel, where we have young people come in and work around different exhibits, science exhibits, get to experience different scientific phenomena. The main idea being so it's constructivism kind of theory in terms of not for them to be explained to them or anything, but they see that they experience the scientific phenomena, or maybe even discover the scientific phenomena themselves. So this is the video that you're seeing now is essentially we're in the very early stages of designing how it's going to look like, and you know what scientific exhibits are going to be there, and how it's going to involve other people also. In this, we're working in partnership with Botna Foundation, who founded it, and the local government in Tanga, the local authority of government in Tanga. They were very gracious to offer some spaces that we could build up something like this. So in a nutshell, with regards to our activities in STEM and Inspire STEM, we include the Rising STEAM Stars program for the kids, the annual STEM boot camps for the secondary school kids, the science kits that we do have, and also now we're working into getting the science centers. And once this one comes up positively, we'll probably open many more around the country. So to some of my conversation in terms of impact, we've had more than 9,000 secondary school kids that we've reached. We've had students and outreaches in many parts of the country. We've had 5 annual STEM boot camps. We've had more than 520 kits that have sold. I think the number is not much more than this. I think maybe twice as this. I need to update this data. And also we've had career fairs and career guidance sessions that we've had. We've had more than 9,000 primary school kids that we've reached out to and tried to see how we can impact their lives. So just out of interest, I know many other issues will be relevant when you ask questions, and you can dive into more. But we have a YouTube channel where we put in a lot of our content where you could browse through to see some of the sessions we do with kids, some of the boot camps we've been doing there, some of the outreaches we've been doing in the community. We're more like, I don't know, about 100 videos in there where you can just quench your appetite, or when you're into a YouTube wormhole or rabbit hole on YouTube. So you're more than welcome to check that out. So yeah, so we've had some of the partners and supporters around over the years. Some are coming in temporarily, some are more permanent, and we hope for growth. We welcome a lot of other supporters who would want to partner with us, a lot in terms of content, in terms of financials, in terms of any other means. But this has been quite an interesting journey. So I think that's a little bit over 15 minutes, but yeah, so.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. You guys have been busy. And so I'm like, we could take another whole day to discuss it. We won't, don't worry. Okay, so this is where the fun begins. Okay, that was the easy part.
Let's do it.
We'll go into some of the greater details, and I can just honestly say this is just very inspiring, just hearing the work you've done and where you want to go as well at the same time. So I want to start going back really to the problem space, and you kind of mentioned earlier about your own experiences, right? Going through remind me again, PCB. What are those exams?
So this is physics, chemistry, and biology. So that it's whenever you're in high school, you choose 3 main subjects to focus on, and then you get to the highest. Yeah. So it's physics, chemistry, and biology mainly.
I was like, I remember what those are, but I don't quite put them together.
Yeah.
But could you what is the, because each of the programs you mentioned, right, they're all
Yeah.
tackling slightly different issue. They're all connected somehow, but I think we missed that component. Like, what is the connecting problem that is driving Project Inspire at the core? What is that issue?
So two things. One is, as I mentioned before, the way the education system is tailored in the country does not allow for a learning that inspires to generate a lot more STEM professionals. In terms of, for example, we don't have labs in primary schools, right? And teachers would want to teach only the theories around it, but then they don't understand that you could use kitchen materials to teach scientific concepts that you're actually missing. So one of the main problem that we're facing and trying to approach here is to improve, or rather put an addendum to our academic system with regards to how we approach teaching science, technology, engineering, and math education to these young ones. And this problem does not only is reflected on the number of people who take up STEM education in tertiary, at the tertiary level at the universities. Not only that, after that, how many would remain in STEM education? So, for example, the number of students who would study in high school physics, chemistry, and biology, or physics, chemistry, and mathematics. I would need to revisit the number, but a lower portion of it, they would go to STEM subjects at university, and they would end up getting lower retaining in this field. So we're thinking, if you tackle the problem from the university level and saying, okay, how can we improve our university curriculum, etc., while the students were not motivated. My dad used to say, if you hated math from school, you can't really, from early on, you can't really end up loving it when you're an adult. So the problem we're trying to tackle here is, how can we improve the output of the number of STEM professionals within the country in a way that will be sustainable from the root all the way up into university. So we're trying to complement that from.
So it sounds like, if I'm trying to re-articulate back, I always try to do this. Let me rephrase what you just said to me.
Yeah. True, great.
In a nugget. Let me put it that way. So you said that this project-based learning is missing. Would you say accurate?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Correct.
Actually inserting yourself, and your audience here is really our K through 12. You're not talking about university students. You're talking about K through 12 specifically. Which one? Are you the entire K through 12 or K8? Like, which grade are you talking about, or is it a distribution?
Yeah. So if including the, to make it much more easier, let's talk about age ranges. So we're talking about from 3 years all the way to 21 years.
Okay, so that includes university though, right? 21?
Yes. Yeah, but so most of the people who would be in high school would, in Tanzania, would start late, would get into the age of 21. So we would not want to. So let's say all the way to Form 6, that would be K-12, right?
Yeah, Form 6 is K-12, at least over here.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. Depends on where you're talking about, right?
Yes.
That's true. In the UK, I did my high school there. It's 13th grade.
Okay. So it's different depending on where you're from. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think this is key, right? So going back to the problem, it sounds like you are, and this is even my own experience. I did not high school, but middle school in Tanzania. So before I left to go to high school in the UK, and so, but this was way back when, probably time as you and I probably are in the same period of time. But you're talking about this project-based learning, right? That essentially is missing, right? And so what it sounds like from what you're doing, Project Inspire, and from all I've seen, Rising STEAM Stars, the PBIL, which we'll talk about, you are essentially providing that avenue for these students to do that project-based learning, right? With the kids as well. I can totally see it, right? It totally makes sense. So is what is your working hypothesis that by providing this project-based learning, you can increase the retention of these students in STEM fields earlier on? That's your working hypothesis?
Yes, correct. So that's a very good summarization of our working hypothesis, in terms of, by doing that, we'll probably help them see that it makes sense what they're learning, because
Mm-hmm.
The connection is missing between what I'm learning in class and what can I do with it in real life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning the atomic number of sodium,
Right.
or of chlorine. What does that have to do with my real life? Oh, I can use chlorine to clear, to sanitize water, for example, during cholera outbreaks. Oh, great. So it makes sense. So trying to link, to make the knowledge make sense in real life, with the hope that they say, oh, great. So we can keep doing this because it actually makes sense. Because most of them will drop out because they'll be like, yeah, science is like, yeah, I don't know. Just doesn't make sense to me. It's just too difficult and too much cramming and things like that. So the hope, as you said it correctly, is to introduce project-based learning and hoping that the retention rate is gonna get higher.
And do you have an intuition, or do you have data to suggest that like this is like teachers are saying, yeah, actually we don't do any project-based learning at all, and students are like, yeah, this will actually help me in the problem space. We're still in problem space. Okay,
Yeah.
we haven't ventured out yet.
Yeah.
Like while you guys were setting this up, like, did you get some intuition, some numbers that will say, out of like 20 schools, one school do PBIL related things, and we want to increase that number to like 50%, right? I'm just thinking, like, what are some of the metrics that you used earlier on to say, okay, this is a useful problem for us to tackle?
Yeah, so in terms of the actual numbers, we don't have the actual figures. I could say maybe out of the 20 schools that we reached out,
Mm.
and 10 were not doing PBL, but it's general. There in the curriculum, after reviewing the curriculums in the country Tanzania, we don't have the aspects of project-based learning. So I mean, I would give you an example of like personal example from public schools that I've attended. You would have only a week or mostly a month at the end of your learning, forms that would be K10 around there, where you can go to an industry and do a visit and write a project summary or something, and that's all you would have. But it's not part of the curriculum, and that is the information, that's the intuition that we had. Like, our curriculum does not have the project-based integrated learning component
Mm-hmm.
in it at all, or even during the teachers training to approach, to become teachers, teaching colleges, they don't have that component as part of the curriculum. So that is has been the metric we've been using in terms of, okay, great, we don't have this in our system. And most of the public, at least the formal public schools that we have, you would find it in what is this called? Vanessa, you can help me out with the name here. The IB curriculums, for example, they would have great components in that area, and these are not the places where you would have common Tanzanians go to. Yeah.
Okay. So there is
So
that exposure, right? There is
yes,
some communities have access, but then
yes,
more that do not,
great.
right?
So eventually, what we've been trying to do over the years, and we have not finished doing it well enough yet, but to repackage the entire initiative in such a way that it could be plugged into the formal system. You get? So we're trying to prototype, work on it, try to learn pitfalls, what are the issues we could do in such a way that when we're ready to go to the ministry and say, great, look, this is what we've been doing over the past 6-7 years, and this is the impact we've had, these are the outcomes we've had, and you can plug in this into a formal curriculum and it will work, or rather it will help improve.
Could you go back to the slide with all your projects, like the Rising Steam Stars all together? I think that's a useful framework for us for the next part of the discussion. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the problem space, as we leave the problem space now, yeah, that's a space that I find myself really spending a lot of time nowadays, a lot, and thinking about that. And I always try to encourage organizations to really have a handle, whether by doing surveys, just get a survey. In your case, the users would be potential schools, like higher like schools that could use your products, and then the students, of course, are the students, right? I'm sure you guys are getting feedback from them, and we'll get to that. But I think you guys have a good problem you have identified there. Try to really package it down in a sentence or two as exactly, look, there's PBIL related work does not exist, or only exists in about 5% of the schools in Tanzania. Like you can have some really hard numbers on there. It helps, you know. Or we can talk about, you know, one of the projects we're working on right now is like think about mentors, and 1 in 3 young people, you know, do not have a mentor, for example, right? And then that number is probably even higher when you talk about developing countries, right? So that immediately gets you, whoa, this is the thing. This is an huge issue, right? It's not anecdotal. It's hard, at least driven by that. So
hard evidence, yeah.
yeah, we've driven into the hypothesis, and this is your mission essentially, right? That you're all these programming, right, and everything built here is essentially trying to target that issue, right? The problem that you've identified earlier, right? It's very clear to me. So, what are the things that you are measuring? Like, how are you positioning all these programs? What are the things that what are you measuring, right, to give you a sense that you're going the right direction? You told me about the number of students you've engaged and so forth as your outputs, but can you talk more about some additional things in terms of, is this project-based approach, is it actually helping these students? Are they doing better in the classroom? Are they staying in STEM, right? Are they more likely to stay in STEM if they're in your program versus not, all right, or in a different comparable program? So I don't know if you've thought about that yet.
Great. So that has been an issue we're grappling with over the years in terms of how do we accurately measure impact of what we're doing and attribute it to our type of innovation, because I mean there are several other types of innovations that are concurrently interventions that are concurrently working into the education space, for example. So that's something I think we actually recently had a very detailed discussion with one of the monitoring and evaluation impact assessment professionals to help us in how do we really coin this thing down. But we've had great feedback, and I will definitely, we're actually compiling to share it now. Most of the students that we've been working with who came through the boot camps came out with, I give you now, we have 5, I think 4 or 5 who are into universities and stuck into studying STEM subjects. I am now teaching at the Mhamilawa University. So every time, I mean, most of the batches, the past 2-3 years, they will identify me. I remember you came to us. We talked about these things. I've attended the boot camps, and now I from there on, I decided to stick to medicine, stick to these things, and that in a way has been, as you call it, anecdotal in terms of that. But then we're struggling, or rather, we're working around how do we assess our impact in terms of, and directly attribute it to that type of changes that we're trying to see. A lot of other young people that are moving and changing things the young ones are changing things in the space of STEM in Tanzania have been attribute their success from our interventions. I'll give you another example. There's a huge young scientist competition, it's called, in Tanzania. For it's usually done, it's funded by the Irish governments and things like that, and the UK government. But they usually bring more than, I think 1,000 kids from all over the country. And year in, year out, the top 10, among the top 10 students who come out of as top winners in that young scientist competition, at least 50% come from the ones who attended the boot camps. And this number is not only just by chance in terms of that.
The boot camps.
The boot camps are usually a full week, and then after that, before that, we usually have mentorship and coaching sessions with them, and then after that, we usually have follow-ups with regards to that, and then we usually have we've had, I think twice now, we've had this called Next Mpemba initiative. I don't know if you know Erasto Mpemba.
No.
It's a very fascinating story. I'll share it some other time. But we have a Tanzanian who discovered a physics phenomena that is named after him, Erasto Mpemba. So this is kind of like an addendum to every time we've had boot camps. The kids that have projects and really need more core mentorship, we bring them back in the middle of the year to continue with them. So we have impact stories. We have success stories that we can clearly attribute them to what we've been doing. But the actual metrics of how to tally it and how good we're doing with regards to a bigger vision, that is something I think will take a few more months to clearly articulate. We're actually on the way to do that.
Yeah, and I think, that's why I asked you how long, right? So with Rising, what is the average length of your programming? The Rising Steam Stars is how long?
So the Rising Steam Stars are usually every Saturday, and that they're spent from 8 a.m. to around 12:30.
Okay, 8 a.m. to 12:30.
Yeah.
And then these students are coming to you from various schools. They're not coming from one school.
Yes. No, they're coming from various schools. So for the Rising Steam Stars, they're coming from various schools.
Okay, because
yeah.
Oh, no, the reason why I'm asking this about the process a little bit is just thinking about the flow, the framework, because when you start thinking about what to measure, you got to think about what are the inputs, and because the students are coming from all over the place. Now the challenge is, if I'm going to track them to see if when they came to my thing, they were impacted somehow, and the changes that have happened is because of my thing, or at least to a higher degree as my thing.
True.
Go into other programming too, right? That is not Projekt Inspire. It can be tough, right, to do that, but you need tracking them essentially. That's the point I'm trying to get at. Like you need to have a good way of tracking and tagging them and saying, okay, student X came from this school. Now there's a tracker ID number that then I can use. If are they coming back every Saturday? How many times have they come for the Rising Steam Stars? How many times have they come in the past month? What's the average number of sessions that a typical student comes to? Do you know that, or do you have a sense?
So we have a with regards to the sessions that we do, we usually have a class size of about 30 students, 25 to 30 students, and so and the return rate is usually at least 70% of the students come repeat returners who come consistently throughout. And we have actually a program we call loyalty cards. We offer loyalty cards where each student who comes more than once, they get a card, and every time they come, we tick if they come, and then after every 5 sessions they come. The next session they don't have to pay to come for the session. Yeah, it gets to become like a loyalty. They collect loyalty points, so that kind of it gives an incentive for the parents to bring them over, and especially for the parents to bring them many times. But also, it also helps us to know who's coming back and who's actually changing, and that is one of the models that we've been trying to use. And in the past, I think usually in the early last year, from February to around March, April, we didn't have sessions because we are restructuring from internally, and we had a lot of parents inquiring, what's happening, why are we not having these sessions, why are kids not, kids are asking, and that has been quite a motivation for us to say, okay, great, so we have a retention rate of about 75% kids coming back. We have this loyalty points program that comes in, and then we have whenever we pose the sessions, there is request for these things, and we keep contact with all the parents that bring kids for this area, and it's now 3 years. So 2017, so 2017, 16, 17, 18, and we have students who started to join us when they're in class, what would it be, class 5, primary school. So by now they're into secondary schools, and they're applying to come for boot camps. That is the next, so we start with them as the Rising Steam Stars, and then they come to participate in the boot camp. So we want to maintain them from there all the way up to the boot camps, and by the time they get into universities, we're like, oh, great. So we've had 20 kids who consistently for the past 10 years, we've started with them from that young age of the Rising Steam Stars all the way to now they're in university. Let's see how they're going to change the world from that end. So to answer that, to respond to that, this is how the setting of the Rising Steam Stars and then the boot camps, and then you let them go into universities and see whether they are changing things or they're actually behaving differently. And we're seeing quite an impact on some of the few that we've had for the past 3 years.
And so what I would do with this slide, I will change it into a pipeline. Okay, like you would have, okay, we are tackling this problem. for multiple points, right? Because each of these trajectory have different issues, right? And I imagine this is your starting suite of things that you're doing. I imagine the future, as you continue to grow, you will innovate, you will iterate, and you will do other types of programming as you learn about, hey, this is a problem. I see that you don't tackle, you don't address the, maybe you do, you don't have like programming specifically for parents, right? Maybe you do, but I'm just saying from this slide, I'm not seeing it. But I see that from other people, people are now doing programming for parents, like in India. One of my colleagues there is doing a programming for parents, which I thought was very fascinating in Manipur. So just before, so the idea then would be, if you can tag these students, right, from that Rising Steam Stars, and then you as you beautifully said it, you now take them onto the next pipeline, right? And of course, some will fall off, and you won't hear from them again or something, but that's fine. The goal, how many get to this career guidance sessions? These are slightly older kids, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And then the idea that at the end of it, how many of them have made it through the whole pipeline, right? And where are they? 100% of them in university, 80% of them in university and doing STEM, right? And that's essentially what you want to say. This is our pipeline. Compare this pipeline to this other pipeline that is them not going through us, or a different pipeline, and how many of them are going to university. So it's like it's not ideal. It's not, RCT, the randomized controlled trials. What we're talking about here is just to give you a comparison point, a starting point, and then say, hey, it's happening with us. We don't know what it is fully, but something's happening, and we want to know what it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's science. You don't really know what it is. You just have an hypothesis around it. But yeah, so great. You. It's funny. I laughed when you mentioned the issues of parents, because that is exactly thing yesterday in the management meeting with the team. We're like, okay, great. So one of the team members from Tanzania, they're like, yo, we need to do this session with parents. Where he had a very interesting way of designing the Rising Steam Stars program that involves partners. Let's kick this in as our starting program. So I think it's in the correct mental space that if even you think that it's of value to do that. And I think the advice of creating this as a pipeline is quite useful, and it will help us we'll feed it in with a lot more numbers in terms of the tracking as we're working with the monitoring, impact monitoring of our activities, and that'll be quite useful, because we have all the contacts of all the students who've been with us since 2016 through all the boot camps, for example, and where they are now. So it's just to repackage that information in a way that'll be useful.
Really, if you can show those graphs, like, we've had X number of students, even now, X number of students have done the boot camps, and X% of them are in university or whatever they're doing, right? Show that graph, like, here's where they are, our alumni, right? And so if you go to the slide where you have all those numbers, the map of Tanzania and so forth. What I'm thinking, here, so
to desegregate these numbers.
These are, for me, these are outputs. Okay.
Yeah.
In a logic model, I don't know if you heard logic models before. So this is, by the way,
LFM,
based on this, right? So these are outputs, like things that you're tracking. It's great you're tracking this, right? And you say 9,691 students you have inspired. So I don't know what that means. Inspiration. Well, how can I put it? Hard to measure. So it'd be interesting to know exactly what you mean by that. But you can parse it out and say, 9,000 students come through our program, if that's true, or whatever number, doesn't matter, and say X number of them are in these effects, and then we have surveyed them, and here are some of the testimonials saying, and I think you said you have some, which is great, just put them in there. 80% of them say that it is because Projekt Inspire really started the spark, right? If this is true, started a spark from me in thinking about STEM and sticking through STEM. You mentioned retention. That's a huge one too, because I think there's so much programming that can be designed, especially in the early stage, figuring out why do students fall through. Your hypothesis that the project-based stuff is it, but there are many other reasons, right? That it's very complicated.
True.
So the question is, can you figure out by surveying these kids, if you can, issues, what are their struggles, and then try to design programming around that, right? And you have provided, I think, your infrastructure to do that. Like from what I've seen right now, I think I'm impressed that you have all these components in place to
Yeah.
continuously innovate, right? That's
Yeah.
the beauty about what you have. But just make
Mm,
sure you're thinking about the pipeline and then
mm,
where are the gaps as you go through, right? And this is leading us to your outputs, right? And this is exactly a beautiful space for us to talk about next.
mm,
What is it that you seek fundamentally, right? For us to put,
mm,
here's the one thing that I would like to see change, and if I see this,
mm,
it will tell me that what we're doing is working. Just one thing. It could be
mm.
many things I know, but one thing for
Yeah.
you is important for you.
So our our motto actually as Project Inspire is, if I've seen further, it's by standing on shoulders of giants.
Mm,
And this is borrowed from John of Salisbury back in the days. So what I would like to see is every young person that I've reached out to and have interacted with
mm,
becomes a giant that allows another young person to stand on so that we could progress forward as a society. I am here where I am because there are people who sacrificed and had uh, innovate had done things to allow me to be here where I am right now, right?
right.
So, and what I am trying to do with Project Inspire essentially is to create a platform where many other young people uh, become impactful change makers in the society so that they can also impact others to make another change and improve our community at large. So that would be one thing when I look back and see um, success stories of young people, say great, so I am now a neurosurgeon because back in 2010 there's this guy who came over to my school and held my hand and took me all the way through to, inspired me and then provided me with the tools that allowed me to build up and see further and become a neurosurgeon, for example. That would be and then the things are changing right now. The world is changing. There is uh, there's a lot more is changing right now in terms of the education. So the need to learn the careers. I mean, the job market are not anymore. You need to learn and unlearn. Being, you can't just say I'm going to be a doctor and that's it. There's many other aspects around that. So to me, what's important, I would say we've succeeded when I look back is to the young people who are impacting the communities and they're making their shoulders available for other young people to stand on and impact and change the community in many various innovative ways they can. Using STEM primarily would be amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. That was, it's very inspirational, I would say.
Mm.
Metric wise is hard, I guess, for me thinking about.
Yeah,
Although the one thing I was thinking, and tell me what you think.
yeah,
Going back to your problem, right? PBIL
yeah,
is
yeah,
lacking in most
yeah.
intensity, right? I
Mm,
always try to, I always fundamentally try to put it back in problem space. Is it
mm,
addressing a
mm.
problem in this situation?
In this person.
If you are, what if about fundamentally changing that culture, right? And
Mm,
I think you are, I think you're going to be doing it. You will do it eventually.
yeah,
You have the
yeah,
innovators, which we didn't talk about, and I hope we offline and
yeah,
we in the future we can talk more about the innovator
yeah.
you're building, which I think is
Mm,
phenomenal because I'm in that
mm,
entrepreneurial space myself,
yeah,
but my background is in neuroscience,
yeah.
and so what do you think about, if let's say you start tracking the number of schools that are, let's say, using your kits. I know this is designed for parents, but let's say
Mm,
or the number of teachers that integrate, let's say if you build a PBIL curriculum that
mm,
can then be integrated, not replacing, but integrated into the existing curriculum. And you said it your own self that the curriculum doesn't have
mm,
this, right? If
yeah.
you were able to see that this PBIL is being sprinkled into the current system, wouldn't that be a huge change? Because now it's like in terms of scaling, you don't have to
Mm,
be in all places at once, right? You can just send your
mm,
curriculum, you can do the
yeah.
training or whatever, right? But then
Mm,
the students in Tanga or in Tabora doesn't have to come to
mm,
Dar because you're based in Dar, right?
mm,
The programming,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Currently, our first year in
I'm curious about that. What do you think?
yeah.
Like, if you were to see that, it'll be
Mm.
interesting, I think. Just a
No,
thought.
I mean, so no, no, you're very right. So the first answer was primarily on a personal level in terms of what I would like to see, but then with regards to as a program, so we have that would be amazing to begin with, and we have had schools who procure these kits, and the teachers use them to teach in class. So we have so far we have three schools. We have Al-Muntaza primary schools. I mean, Al-Muntaza schools, probably, I don't know if you, but it's one of the huge private schools in the countries. And these have been our guinea pigs, so to speak, to have them use the science kits in the integrate them into the teaching in the classrooms. And
Okay.
we've had an entire year with them in two ways. One, they procured, I think, procured a number of kits, and then we've had our people go work with the teachers during the classroom sessions. And we've had assessments around those areas and things like that. And this is the same model that we're going to use in Tanga right now. Actually, we're now designing, just the corona made things difficult, but we've designed a program where we'll have more than 60 teachers from 30 different schools. We'll bring them together, teach them our curriculum, and provide them with our kits because of the funding that we recently received. So we provide them with the kits and see how they can integrate them in the daily regular teachings in the class. So in terms of after having one full year working with the school that has procured all of our sets of kits that we've had, and we've had a number of sessions with them, we feel pretty confident that this can be easily integrated into as you said, not replace but integrate. One of the times that is usually very useful for the schools is we have club sessions. Different schools have different club days, or like a debate club or things like that. So with the Mutaz, we started with the science clubs, and that were working with the teachers around there was very useful. So now we'll be having this scale up, so you would call, with these 30 schools in Tanga. We're starting with all the 60 science teachers, and then teach them our curriculum and see how they could work. So once we evaluate that and how they've been able to do it at a scale of 30 schools, it'll be much easier to say, okay, great, so this works. Let's up a notch with it and send these results to the government and say, good, we've had this 30 schools in this region and they worked. So can we scale it up to, let's say, 100 schools and use Tanga as this is the vision that we've been having. Use Tanga as a model city where we do this for a year and see how the performance soars or declines with this. And we've identified the 30 schools as a control, and we have other schools that are in it. We're doing some form of an RCT actually, with other schools that will not be able to reach them because of resources, but we just identify them and monitor their progress in terms of academia and see things like that. And once the science center is complete in Tanga, we'll use that also as a platform to see, okay, we'll be inviting more of other schools to come in, and others will have incentives to come to learn from the science center, and then later on measure how much of an impact or an improvement it has had in terms of their performance, in terms of the retention rate and things like that when they get to high school or get to university. So it is in that pipeline, of, if you want to call it, as of now. And our next phase will be with the 30 schools in Tanga that we'll be working with this year.
That's amazing, just amazing. And I'm impressed. How are you doing all of this? Who is in your team?
Yeah, I think me and Vanessa got really, really lucky, but it was also by design, because everyone who's in our team right now, you'll be shocked. These are the people these are the students who, in our very first boot camp in 2015, they came to attend the boot camps as students. So we trained them, we kept them over there, we kept on working with them, so they understand the spirit behind this. So even the times when we don't have any funding, they essentially volunteer to come and do these things for free. free, basically. And they're the ones who, essentially, for the past 2 years, have been running the show in Tanzania. Well, I've been studying in Sweden, and Vanessa has been in studying also in the US. And these are the people who actually do the show. And if I'm proud of anything, I mean, apart from the actual work we've been doing with Projekt Inspire, is the team that actually believes in what we do. And we have 6 people in the core team, and we have, I don't know, maybe 60, 70 volunteers, students who come over and come and go every time we have a session, and help us in our outreaches and things like that. So that has been quite useful for us, and I'm excited to go back home probably end of June, July, to get back my feet on the ground.
And I know today we didn't dig deep into your own history, but you said right now you are in Sweden doing an
Yeah.
MD. Is that, oh, PhD, sorry?
I'm doing a PhD. I'm doing a
But
PhD, yeah.
you already have an MD though, right?
I already have an MD, yeah.
Of course, you're such a busy
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah. I already have an MD. So I did an MD and then went over to correct.
That's
Yeah.
impressive. Are you almost done with the PhD or towards the end or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's towards the end. Actually, I just submitted my first draft of I couldn't pick up the meeting yesterday because I was working through deadlines of submitting my thesis draft yesterday. So I've done that draft. So I'm now
I can,
probably, if all goes as planned. Yeah. So if all goes as planned, I'm going to defend. I'll defend on May 25th this year, and then go back home. So.
wow. So I think usually this time, if you're defending that soon, usually people are like defense mode. And so I'm
Yeah.
impressed that you're with us, you know, giving this, telling us more about your organization. So I can
Yeah.
relate. I remember those days of.
Yeah. So.
So
You know,
how can we, I'm very interested in the kids, you know, the way you've described it sounds very appealing in terms of
mm,
getting them into the schools, even in the hands of the parents.
mm,
I'm assuming you guys are now figuring out how to build an evaluation plan around them to see if they
mm.
are making a difference, right? So very briefly, did you have something in the works there to measure, like, because these kids are just being released, right? They're fresh
Yeah.
here. So
Yeah.
do you have a plan of assessing like how impactful they are, and if so, what is it?
So there are two things that are in line with the kids. So this has been an idea that's quite fresh in terms of saying, um, how can we still do these things and reach further away? But we don't have. We're building up. We wanted to see, can we build these kits anyway, and can we produce them locally? Can we do that? So we debated about this for a number of months and said, great. So let's just jump and build an airplane on the way down, make sure we don't crash. So it was purely in that mental space of, okay, great. So we need to repackage the sessions. Essentially, the kits are a repackaging of the Rising Steam Star sessions. So if you have one
Right.
kit, you can have a whole session of the Rising Steam Stars with that, like what we do. But then as I've mentioned, that now we've jumped. Now that it's being picked up, now the interest is there. So now, what's the next phase is creating the platform. Okay, can we do a proper impact assessment of how these kids have been doing? And the unfortunate thing, I want to say is, they are, what the kids do is not teach you to answer a question in an exam in terms of, when in an evaluation metric, you would say, okay, now this child can answer this question properly. It's more like they create a critical thinking mindset, a problem solving mindset, and these can be slightly tricky to measure as a metric, and say, now 10 kids can critically think. You can appreciate the challenge that it might bring, and these quite qualitative qualities, which are the ones that actually make the difference in terms of, what do they ask the right questions, do they can these kids, whenever they interact with the scientific phenomena or whatever they interact with the kids, can they be creative in there? We have one favorite kit. It's called the construction kit. It's a house. You build a house model around it. There's a map and things like that. And every time we go to sessions with kids, some kids will go like, you know what, I don't follow your map. I'm going to build my own, type of house. So they would end up building a two-story building or a house with a veranda and things like that, which are not in the map. And you'd be like, okay, great. So there's this kind of, it inspires them to think outside the box. And what this will do is to help them introduce this kind of model of thinking into other problems in life, into other areas, and become much better, community people and solve problems. So the challenge would be, I would love to have this conversation much more with you in terms of how can we create the best metric into assessing the impact of these kits and the PBR model we have.
So for SAI,
yeah,
the problem we're tackling is really looking at the interface between science and society and the gap in the middle. There are many gaps, and we fundamentally work in that space. So we're an incubator, we're a think tank. So we do research, develop, and also advise and consult. So absolutely, we can continue chatting. And one of the things that we love to do is, I love to do in particular, is to brainstorm, and thinking about like the kids. Maybe you should take a step back and think about, let's just start with baby steps, right? You created this kit, like, why did you think about creating this kit? Were you hearing from the students that, hey, it would be great to get this programming that you're providing in a kit fashion I can do at home, right? So make sure like your thinking flow is built in, because as you iterate other programs, you want to have that framework in mind. Like, how do we develop new programs in the situations? You got to say, okay, we always need to be driven by what people, like what the users are saying. But also, yes, your own intuition is fine. But I was thinking the teachers, for example, don't forget them. Yes, for the students, it's impact them, but what are the teachers saying? Are they saying this is actually very helpful for me? Is it helping me teach better, right? Are my students performing better? And we can use the metric here because the exams are already there. They're not going away, right?
True.
Are those students who are the classrooms that use the kits, are the students performing better in exam? Now, the exam is not built necessarily for students that are going to be thinking like this, right? Outside the box and innovating. But I think don't forget the teachers. That's all I want to try to say. Don't forget the teachers. They are also your users here. And you can really get some data from them. I think you're breaking up a little bit there.
Yeah, I think there's some network issue. You're frozen actually, but can you hear me? I can hear you, but can you hear me?
Let's see if we can stop the video. Try to stop your video and let's see. Yeah, because of the bandwidth probably going down.
So let me see if I can.
Actually,
okay, great. Got it.
Yeah. You're back now. Perfect. So, so what were you saying? Sorry.
Yeah. So, I was saying this comes at this conversation actually comes at an optimal time in terms of helping us rethink this situation. We are going to have a very good interaction with these teachers. We've had a session with them. Our first workshop with the teachers in Tanga was in December, and they were quite excited. The thing is, every time you have this session with teachers, they are more excited, just like the kids, to play with these kids. They discover this phenomenon, and they're like, yo, this can be done. They didn't even know how. Some of them wouldn't have. You talk to them about acids and base, that you can take vinegar in your kitchen and baking powder and then mix the two. That's an acid and base reaction, and you could get salted water, and they're like, oh yeah, it actually works. So we see this excitement, at least for the times that we've had interaction with the teachers. They are themselves, they're excited by the whole approach of teaching, using different projects, using these kits, and that directly translates with the excitement to use these kits in class. And one of the things that we're discussing actually with a team recently is the sessions that we're going to have with the teachers in Tanga in the next few weeks will be also a learning process from us to evaluate them. How are they working right now? And how these tools can be as aids for them. So we're now designing we've actually designed the evaluation model to see what is the baseline for them, And after this, how is it going to look like? The difference with the teachers we're interacting with right now, with the teachers we were interacting with at the private schools, is teachers in private schools, they have different access to different resources. Yeah, they have access to more resources than teachers from public schools, and even in terms of the materials that they have in class, in terms of uh, even if a school can pay to us to go and do a session with them, then that means they have more access to many other things like this. But then the teachers that we're going to be working with in Tanga, these are actually the target market where most of the Tanzanians are from. So it's going to be quite an interesting learning process for us.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
you have all the components there. And on the
Yeah.
last thing before we finish up here, the science centers that you talked about,
Mm.
fantastic. There's an organization we're working with in Uganda that's building a whole like STEM-based school there, and it'd be
Mm-hmm.
great just to engage them and just see what they're doing. But I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a, of course in the US there are tons and tons of science
Yeah.
and science centers, but this I think will be fantastic. And
Mm.
I'm curious, so just to summarize, like what do you need help with, for just what do you need help with in terms of just overall your organization? Is it funding? Is it like what is it that you need most help with?
So there could be a lot. Definitely we still need funding, but
Mhm.
to me, personally, I think one of the things I would definitely need is to work with a team or a company or someone who would help us repackage our impact story and retell our impact story in terms of being able to say, okay, we have a lot of materials, we have a lot of things, everything is lying everywhere, we have a lot of numbers, we have a lot of these things. And one thing that would be quite useful for us at this juncture, 5 years down the lane,
Mm,
would be to work with someone or someone to help us with design, like making sense of all these numbers in a way that we didn't see before, in
mm,
a way that, okay, so hey guys, you're missing this part. For example, this idea of a pipeline, we've been saying it over and over and over again, but then we're probably not in a fashion of the pipeline as you phrased it here now. So one thing would be to help that we might need help to retell our impact story in terms of making sense of the numbers and recraft that. In that way, it'll be much easier to source even more funding moving forward from many other places, and collaboration with the governments and things like that. So that's to me at least would be one thing that we need. And then we also need many partners who come with ideas, especially for the boot camps that we usually do. Usually open to different themes, different professionals. We usually invite them, people who are working in the areas of water hygiene and sanitation, people in the food industry, in the tech industry. We usually, have these themes that are around, and we collaborate at the level of actual implementation of things. So there are three layers to this. So the layer of actual implementation of the project in terms of hands-on, and then the second layer of the conceptualizing and making sense of the numbers of our impact story, and then the last layer would be come in terms of the funding.
And funding is always the hardest part, right? And so it
Yeah.
sounds like are you guys a nonprofit, not NGO in Tanzania or registered anywhere else?
So we're not an NGO per se. We registered as social. We started as a social enterprise,
Okay.
and mainly because we wanted to be able to produce these kits and sell them. As an NGO, you will not be able to do that, especially for the regulations in Tanzania. You can't promote trade of any type. So
Which
we
is
would be, yeah. So we would be dependent on donor funds, and we will not be sustainable. So that's the main reason we categorically decided not to be an NGO.
I think that's a smart idea. In the US,
Mm,
they're called L3Cs. That's kind of what you would
mm,
go, social enterprises.
mm,
But NGOs here in the US can absolutely sell and, do money making activities as long as they fulfill as long as it's in line with their mission. It has to be
mm,
towards of their mission. That's
mm.
the underlining bolded statement.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, I mean, and,
from
and
our
now the just so you know, the policy changes in the country now. Recently, the country erased social enterprises.
oh
So you have to either be an NGO or you have to be a company, limited by shares or things like that. So we had to shift because otherwise you would be deleted and not exist anymore. So that has been a havoc we've been struggling with the past few weeks.
Oh, so you guys have to shift completely.
Yeah, we'd have to shift completely in that regard. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay, that's interesting to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of your ask earlier, yeah, we are. This is our first conversation, of
Yeah.
course. And for anybody else that's going to be watching this later, do reach out to the organization directly, and I'll give you a chance at the end to give people like a way to get in touch with you if they want to ask you more questions or help in any way, right? Donate or
Yeah,
something.
sure. Sure.
But our end, as SAI. I would definitely like to get in touch later and just talk more about how we can help. You have a lot of tracks, the way I'll call them in your pipeline, lots of different tracks. And it actually is really great because then people can enter at different points, given their own interests organizationally. And the Science Center sounds really, really interesting. The kids, I'm particularly intrigued because it reminds me of some of my team members that are working with like organization called like Backyard Brains. You should check them out. Backyard Brains, who build kids science kits, more neuroscience driven. That's my area. So I'm towards that space. But also just thinking about what impact could you have, because these kids, from what I've seen, the pricing actually is fairly cheap. From what you've created, and you sounds like you're building them all in house,
Yeah.
right? And so you could imagine that being something that if an organization can come in and say, okay, we want to help you either get these kids into more schools, right? Increase your production rate, right? How do we get them? Of course, this will be based on data that these kids actually do have an impact,
Generate, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You really need to show that. I don't think you need to wait until you have them in 300 schools and showing. Start with one school, one classroom, and just baby steps. I'm very much fond of baby steps, and say, okay, and this teacher who used our kits for 1 year, this is what has happened for those students in the classroom of whatever 40 students. This is what has happened to them, and comparing that to a classroom in the same school, right? So you have like in the same school that did not use our kits, right? And I think you probably have that already somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. That's why I was saying that it's we have a lot of numbers, a lot of data, a lot of information laying around. So it would be quite an interesting conversation for us to have in terms of how do we package it in for it to make sense in terms of the numbers and things like that.
Yeah, that's so we are very, very interested in that, in the science kits in particular. Of course, the whole Project Inspired, you guys are doing some phenomenal work. And one of the things that our vision for us, our own NGO, is to be in a place where we work with organizations like you. We love what you do, and we can increase capacity, and say, we love what you're doing. We can help you with the messaging and articulation of what you're doing, and thinking about an innovation plan that gets you going. There's quite a few grants. I don't know if you guys have ever written grants as well, from around the world. Actually, you're not really limited, that can try to access if it's packaged right and showing impact. So we definitely will continue talking.
Yeah, definitely. I would love that. I would love that. I mean, we've had. I mean, some of the grant that we've recently written is the one that we got for the Science Center in Tanga.
Yeah.
But definitely would love to again. That's why I mentioned, as I mentioned earlier on, having made sense of all these numbers that we have and the data that we have and the information we have will make it much easier to move on to many other grants that we could potentially get.
Exactly. Exactly. And one other organization you might want to take a look as well is called Science Clubs. They're based in South America. They have quite a few clubs around the different countries: Bolivia, Mexico, Brazil. They're a fantastic model, and a lot of overlapping features. One of the things that we end up having is some of our students at Harvard do end up going and teaching. So they have actually quite an interesting model where they have like these, for those clubs, for the session that you perhaps are doing. It sounds to me like you're using in-house people doing the sessions. The science clubs in South America, they have in-house people, of course, but they also bring people from outside, students who are interested in the work, and they bring them from the US or wherever the other country to come and spend a week, just like you guys, a week with the students, and they teach them, like, these are very short courses. They teach them a very specific course, and students can register. These are university students, maybe late high school, perhaps, but they're much older. But the model essentially could be applied in any, target population, if you will. But there are these organizations. What we do is try to map them. We do for Africa. There's a growing map on Wikipedia. I started this a couple of years ago, and it's grown huge. And you guys are on there, actually.
Yes, I've noticed.
So what I try to do is connect the dots, and that's why I told you earlier, I really focus on science and society. You guys are one of the bridges that is, and I want to strengthen that bridge and help you guys build, make it better and stronger and so forth. So,
I'm happy we've had this conversation. I mean, I remember we've started to sort of talk about a year or so, or more, maybe a year and something. We've had one-on-ones, brief ones, but I think now it's about time to pick up the pace. Now we have even more content and more things to discuss. By then, I think we didn't even have the kits or something like that. They were still evolving. So
yeah. Exactly. So I definitely will reach out to you, especially for the kids. I want to continue to learn more, and we can chat. Maybe you said your defense is May 25th?
May 25th, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe we can connect after that.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great.
To get you some space to do one thing at a time.
Yeah.
But this has been fantastic. I really thank you so much for providing those insights, and I think for those who are listening and watching this later on, do check them out. So Lwidiko, do you want to tell people how can they get in touch with you? Do you have a slide with your website on there? I'll put it on the chat, but tell people how they can get in touch with you. Oh, there it is.
All right. Yeah, so this is our website, and also I would just like to, maybe I could type in here our like an email address that we usually use. It's info at Projekt Inspire.
Okay.
Yeah. inspire.co.tz.
Perfect.
So this is an email address you can get through us.
Perfect. So yeah, our goal as well is to increase your exposure as much as possible. Yeah. People can get in touch with you, and
that'd be great. Would really love.
Fantastic. So Lwidiko and Vanessa, yeah, I think you feel free to add anything you may want. But I will, if you wouldn't mind, if both of you can stay on the line for a little bit. Once I stop the recording, that would be great. For everyone else, thank you so much, and look forward to our next Nano Chat that will be posted on our site. Again, thanks. Bye.
All right. Right.